When I stood at the door, suitcase ready in hand, my heart was overflowing with excitement for the European vacation with my children, a lifelong dream of mine to have one joyful trip with the whole family before my final rest. But just then, my phone vibrated. A message appeared cold and merciless. "You will not be coming with us. My husband wants this vacation to be only for family. Having you along would only be a burden, and nobody wants that." They took their in-laws with them and left me behind. The irony? I was the one who had paid for their brand new house. And I was also the one who immediately canceled all the payments and sold that very house, leaving them with a shock they could never have expected. You will be utterly stunned when you find out what was waiting for them after that vacation. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, pouring a warm golden glow across the room. I was folding my favorite travel shirt, the smooth blue cotton fabric in my hands, carefully pressing out each wrinkle. In my mind, I pictured the moment I would wear it for dinner at the little restaurant Elena had found near the Vienna Opera House, a place where crystal chandeliers promised a dazzling night. The suitcase lay wide open on the bed like a promise, already half filled with clothes I had carefully chosen for our European adventure. The weather app predicted sunny skies in Vienna, perfect for strolling through the historic squares, maps already printed and tucked into my carry-on. I hummed an old Elvis Presley tune under my breath, debating between polished brown leather shoes or the soft walking sneakers. My ticket to Vienna International Airport rested neatly on the nightstand beside my passport. Every document was in order, everything prepared. 6 hours remained until departure. My heart beat faster, the familiar rush before a journey, laced with anticipation and excitement. Then the phone buzzed. Elena's name lit up the screen. I set the shirt down and answered, expecting a last-minute detail about the flight or a reminder to meet at the airport. Instead, the words that appeared froze the blood in my veins. "Don't come to the airport. You're not going. This is a family trip and you're not part of it." I read it once, then again, a third time. Still, I couldn't believe my eyes. My trembling finger hovered over the screen, as if waiting for some miracle that the message might change on its own. The shirt slipped from my hands, falling to the floor with a soft sound that echoed like a door bolt sliding shut. The once bright room sank into an icy silence. The light seemed to vanish, leaving only the slow, deliberate tick of the clock, marking the moment my own daughter cast me aside. Family, the word hammered in my head like a blow. Family, but not with me. Family that included her in-laws. Family, and who was I in that definition? I looked at the still open suitcase. It was no longer a promise of adventure, but a black hole swallowing every hope. A graveyard of broken dreams. With trembling hands, I typed a reply. But instead of, "All right," my voice sank into the letters, heavy and final. "If in your eyes family has no place for a father, then consider me as though I never existed. Send." The screen went dark. A massive weight pressed down on my chest. Disappointment spreading through me, cold, silent, and sharp enough to cut straight into my heart. I looked around the bedroom, and everything I had prepared for the trip now stood only as evidence of a shattered dream. The neatly lined travel bottles on the dresser sat in silence like mute witnesses. The guidebooks, still marked with yellow sticky notes on pages describing Gothic architecture, the very places we had once planned to visit. The brand new camera I had bought for the trip still lay in its box, never once touched by light. I closed the suitcase with slow, deliberate movements, as though I were burying everything with my own hands. Each heavy click of the lock sounded like the slamming shut of fate's door. I called the airline, sat through the looping hold music, each note mocking my foolish hope. The operator's voice was polite but brisk. "I'm sorry to hear you've changed your plans, Mr. Eric." I wondered if she could hear the fracture in my voice. Afterward, I sat motionless in the living room. The travel brochures scattered across the coffee table had become nothing more than torn fragments of a dream. The house felt emptier than ever. It was no longer a home but a prison of caged dreams. Outside, Daisy's dog barked into the distance, the sharp, persistent sound echoing like ridicule in my ears. The wall clock ticked on, each beat like a countdown of the life I had been pushed out of the very definition of family. I picked up one brochure, a glossy advertisement of Gothic cathedrals in Europe, and set it aside on a side table. A meaningless act, but for me, it was like signing the sentence that confirmed my deliberate exclusion. The evening dragged in with suffocating emptiness. I lived through each hour like a ghost, leaving dirty dishes in the sink instead of washing them as I used to. The locked suitcase still sat there by the bedroom door, like a cold tomb burying hope. I turned on the television, the evening news murmuring in the background, though I heard none of it. My hand kept reaching for my phone, scrolling through Facebook like a desperate man clinging to the faint glow of a screen. That blue light no longer offered comfort, it had turned into something cold and merciless. And then I saw it. A photo of Chad's parents standing in front of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, radiant smiles capturing the joy of travelers reveling in the perfect moment. The caption read, "The beginning of the most wonderful family vacation." The timestamp glared uploaded just 2 hours ago. My finger froze. For a fleeting second I lied to myself. Maybe they went separately. Maybe it was an old photo. But my heart raced as I clicked further into the profile. And there it was, the unforgiving truth. Another photo, same time, same place. But this time, there were 4 of them. Chad's parents, Chad, and Elena, all 4 sitting outside a wine bar in Berlin, glasses glinting in the background. Elena's caption hit me like a knife. Only those truly family deserve to be here on this trip. My stomach clenched tight. With trembling fingers I counted the faces. 1, 2, 3, 4. The word family burned in my mind, searing like letters branded with red-hot iron. I put the phone down, the screen still glowing, illuminating their happy faces. I stepped to the kitchen window, looking across to the neighbor's house where warm yellow light poured out from their windows, a family gathered around the dinner table. And here I was, standing alone, abandoned in my own blood story. I picked up the phone again, clinging to the hope of a miracle that the photos would somehow change. But they remained, the smiles still carefree, the eyes still shining, all 4 of them together, in the city I had painstakingly planned for, enjoying the very journey I had so carefully prepared. I turned back to the window, seeing my reflection in the glass, a gaunt face, hollow eyes. Behind that reflection, still lit on my phone screen, was their group photo. Their happiness layered over my loneliness, a cruel contrast too sharp to ignore. It was a brutal reminder that in their definition of family, I had never truly existed. I barely slept all night. I tossed and turned, the sheets tangled around me. Every time I closed my eyes, the images from Facebook returned. Elena's radiant smile, Chad raising his glass of wine, Chad's parents beaming against the backdrop of magnificent Munich. All of it weighed down on me like a recurring nightmare. The next morning, the light filtering through the curtains no longer felt like golden sunlight, but a mourning shroud draped over the room. Everything looked gray, lifeless, cold. I knew I couldn't go on in silence. I needed answers. I sat in the kitchen, clutching my coffee cup. The liquid rippled inside, reflecting my trembling hand, as though it might slip and shatter. I inhaled deeply, rehearsing words in my mind, but none seemed enough. The wall clock ticked, each hollow beat like a gavel striking in some invisible courtroom. In Munich it was afternoon, the perfect time to call. I dialed. The international ringtone dragged on, expensive and ominous, each chime like a stroke of fate. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then Elena's cheerful voice broke through. "Hi, Dad." Background noise bled into the line. Chad's voice, passers-by, the lively hum of a European city. But inside me, everything constricted. "I need to understand something," I said, my voice low and heavy, cutting straight to the point. "What is it?" she replied, distracted, as if she were glancing into shop windows while we spoke. "I saw the photos on Facebook. Chad's parents went with you." A long pause followed. Not from the signal, but from hesitation. Then Elena's voice shifted, colder, defensive. "Dad, we can explain. You said this trip was for family. Then what am I?" Her tone hardened. "Look, Chad says you're always imposing. He doesn't want his vacation ruined." Imposing. Ruined. The words struck like hammers in a merciless trial. My voice cracked. "I bought the tickets, and Chad's parents paid for themselves. They never expected you to shoulder anything." That word shoulder hung in the air like an accusation. "I helped because it was your choice," I pressed. Elena's response was ice, slicing through the last fragile thread. "We never asked you to hold it over us." From the background, Chad's carefree laughter spilled through laughter about something entirely unrelated. That sound stung more than words, like a slap across the face. My jaw clenched. "To be honest, Dad," Elena continued, her voice growing harder with each word, "Chad is right. You're too dependent. We don't want to be dragged down anymore." Dependent. The word echoed in my mind like a death sentence. The phone in my hand suddenly felt as heavy as lead. The kitchen froze around me. The ticking clock transformed into the final gavel strike of judgment. Quietly I rasped, "So, that's my place in your family. We'll talk when we get back," Elena replied, firm, as though closing a case file. "Understood." I hung up without a goodbye. I set the phone on the table as carefully as if I were placing down a verdict of death. The word dependent bored into me, repeating like a curse. I walked into my study, walls lined with family photos. But now, the room felt more like a graveyard of memories. I saw the stages of my life preserved in glass frames. Teaching Elena to ride a bike, her graduation day, her smile wide, my pride spilling into tears. Her wedding, where I walked her down the aisle. A wedding that cost $45,000, paid in full by me, was meant to be a dream, but now I saw it as the nightmare's beginning. The college graduation photo I had paid off her student loans when Chad was unemployed. The house hunting pictures I had co-signed the mortgage when the bank refused. In the drawer, I still kept the statements. $100,000 withdrawn from my retirement fund for their down payment. Money for a car when Chad lost his job. Credit card bills I absorbed. And the travel fund I'd saved for years, the money that bought their European tickets. Each figure cut like a blade straight to the heart. But it wasn't only money. I remembered the sacrifices. The fishing trip with old friends I canceled because Elena needed me to watch the kids. The woman from my book club who asked me to dinner I declined because Elena needed help moving. My own travel dreams, postponed again and again, exchanged for their convenience. Sunday dinners where Chad barely acknowledged me. Holidays where I sat like an outsider. The subtle looks, the silent signals that made it clear. I was never truly welcome except for my wallet. My hands trembled as I flipped each photo face down. The frames hit the wood with a dull thud, like the burial of my last illusions. Dependent. That word still reverberated, like echoes in a dark cavern. A word they had hurled like a knife, erasing an entire lifetime of fatherhood. I shot to my feet so fast the chair toppled backward, slamming into the wall. The sound cracked like thunder, marking the moment when part of my heart died. In the mirror above the desk, I saw a different man, no longer patient, no longer gentle. A man who had been exploited, who had mistaken generosity for love, and who had received only manipulation and betrayal in return. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed, the cursor blinking in the Authorized Users tab. Elena and Chad's names sat there, cold and clinical, proof of years of manipulation. The blinking cursor pulsed like a ticking time bomb, daring me. One click, and everything would change. My finger hovered, trembling, just a breath away from erasing it all. But I closed the laptop. Not yet. The storm was gathering. When it broke, nothing would stop it. The room sank into a suffocating silence. The laptop sat sealed like a coffin, and I remained there, among the tombstones of memory, in a house that seemed to be holding its breath with me. The familiar chime from my banking app pierced the heavy silence of the room. That sound was no different from the toll of a judgment bell, like an invisible gavel striking in the secret courtroom of my mind. At first, I almost ignored it, assuming it was just another meaningless notification, a credit check, a promotional offer. But something, a dark instinct, pushed me to pick up the phone, as though the shadows in my head were urging me toward an exit. The screen lit up. A new transaction has been processed. I unlocked the app with my fingerprint, my heart pounding like war drums. For a brief moment, I hoped it would be nothing more than the utility bill or groceries. But then the details appeared, stabbing straight into my chest. 8:20. Restaurant Königshof. Munich, Germany. The timestamp, right at lunchtime in Munich, just 2 hours earlier. The room went cold. Instantly, all the fragments fell into place, forming a brutal picture. Elena had used my supplementary card. The very card I had given her years ago when she was struggling to build credit. I thought I was giving her a chance at independence. In truth, I had handed her the key to exploit her own father. The irony was vicious. They had cast me out of their so-called family trip, yet they sat comfortably at a luxury table in Munich, paying with my money. I scrolled down. More transactions appeared, each like a bullet slamming into my chest. A luxury hotel, a high-end fashion boutique, tickets to tour an old castle, all of it charged to my card. Meanwhile, Chad's parents were still being praised as the ones who paid their own way and never burdened their children. I lurched to my feet, staggering around the study. The walls, once covered with family photographs, no longer held memories. They had become evidence exhibits. Every framed smile, every snapshot of happiness now looked like proof in a case I had refused to see. A voice rang clear and sharp in my head. Enough! This is my chance. I opened the card management page, scrolling to authorized users. And there it was, Elena's name, cold, detached, like a black dot marking the end of my naivete. As I stared at it, another notification flashed, its words as sharp as a blade across the throat. Payment approved. Kaufhof Boutique, Munich, 93 Euro. We hope you enjoy your shopping. I let out a bitter laugh. Even the bank seemed to be mocking me, treating me like nothing more than a walking wallet. That was the final straw. My finger hovered over Remove User. It felt no different from resting a finger on the trigger of a gun, poised to fire. The screen displayed the confirmation prompt. Are you sure? This action cannot be undone. I whispered to myself. One touch. To end a lifetime of being used. And I pressed. The screen lit up one last time. Action successful. Authorized user access revoked. In the darkened room, the glow from the phone illuminated my face like a surgeon's lamp, exposing the first smile I had worn in days. It was thin, crooked, but sweet, the first crack in a block of ice that had frozen for far too long. I set the phone down on the desk carefully, as though I had just signed the death sentence for years of exploitation. In the black screen of my computer, my reflection stared back a man who had lost too much, but had just reclaimed his first fragment of power. I walked into the kitchen and switched on the coffee maker. The gurgling sound rose like an overture for a new life. Through the window, I heard the steady buzz of a neighbor's lawnmower. The world outside went on peacefully, unaware that within this house, a silent revolution had just begun. The next morning, at 8 o'clock sharp, I sat at the kitchen table, savoring my coffee for the first time in days. The rich, bitter aroma filled the air as the morning paper lay open before me. Sunlight streamed through the window, warm and calm until my phone erupted, buzzing violently across the table. The screen flashed with an international number. I glanced at the clock. 3 in the afternoon in Munich. I let it ring twice more, each chime echoing like the strike of a gavel in a courtroom, before I finally picked up. I no longer rushed to please them, nor feared missing their calls. Good morning, Elena, I said evenly. On the other end, I heard a sharp intake of breath. What the hell did you do with the card? My daughter snapped, her voice cold and venomous. No greeting, no concern, only fury. You humiliated me in front of everyone. At lunch, the card was declined right in front of Chad's parents. The waiter had to come back 3 times. I sat there like a beggar. Do you have any idea how degrading that was? I sipped my coffee slowly, deliberately. Must have been embarrassing. Embarrassing? It was mortifying. You can't do this. I need that card. For what? My voice dropped lower. Didn't you once say you didn't need your father to keep taking care of you forever? That's completely different, Elena shrieked. There was a pause, a muffled whisper, and then her voice returned, dripping with poison. If you don't restore it immediately, I swear you'll regret it. A nursing home will be where you end your life. The cup froze mid-air. The rising steam seared my hand like a cruel warning. A nursing home? I repeated slowly, tasting every word. Her tone hardened. You're getting old. Clearly, you're no longer capable of handling your finances. We'll sell this house to cover the costs. You don't need all that space anyway. From the background, Chad's voice cut in, cold and commanding, like a warden delivering a sentence. Tell him it's for his own good. Elena echoed, her voice as sharp as a blade. Chad says it's for your own good. I sat in silence for a moment, weighing their words. They wanted to lock me away in some unfamiliar place, to strip me of the home I had preserved for 42 years, all because I stopped paying for their luxury vacation. The audacity was beyond belief. Are you listening? Restore the card. Now, Elena barked. I heard everything. Good. Then you'll fix it, right? I set the cup down, my voice turning to steel. Number, and this is not a request, it's a decision. On the other end, Elena screamed, What did you just say? No? That's right. Number, if your idea of family is to imprison your father and steal his home, then prepare to pay the price. For now, enjoy what's left of your so-called family vacation. Dad, don't do this. Elena's voice broke, but I had already ended the call. I pressed the phone flat against the table. My hand no longer trembled, it was steady as I lifted the cup for another sip. Through the kitchen window, the familiar green of my garden spread out, steady and serene. This was my fortress, and they were wrong to think they could claim it so easily. That house carried only my name on the deed, the house they planned to sell to cage me somewhere, convenient. No, not this time. I rose to my feet. Each step across the wooden floor echoed like a drumbeat heralding a counterstrike. Behind me, the abandoned cup of coffee still steamed, but I kept walking straight toward my office. There was still work to be done. I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out the folder containing the deed. The paper was old but firm, the bold typeface still clear. As the morning light fell across it, it no longer looked like a mere legal document, but like a cold, lawful weapon, sharp and waiting to be used. And it wasn't for the house I currently lived in, but for the second one, the house belonging to Elena and Chad on Oakwood Street. Only my name appeared on that deed, just as it had the day I paid for it. I remembered the conversation 2 years ago, when Elena had laughed lightly and said, It's only to get the bank's loan approved, Dad. Once things are stable, we'll switch it into my name. And then came the endless delays next month, next season, next year. Empty promises, one after another. They were always too busy with their own lives, while I waited patiently, until now. Now that house was no longer a father's gift, but a prize I was about to reclaim. Rummaging through the drawer, I found the familiar business card. Joyce Realty, the man who had sold me both houses. A man who knew his work, who was reliable, and most importantly, who knew how to keep silent. I slipped the card into my pocket and picked up the keys. Their metallic jingle rang out like the opening bell of a battle. The drive carried me across Springfield, the city I had called home my entire life. Houses lined the streets, small shops opened their doors early. Daisy, my neighbor, bent over her flower bed, then looked up and waved with a warm smile. A scene that should have felt peaceful, yet to me, it was nothing more than the eerie calm before the storm. I nodded back and pressed the accelerator. 20 minutes later, I parked in front of Joyce Realty, a Georgian-style building that Joyce himself had renovated into a stately office. When I walked in, he looked up from his computer, surprise flickering in his eyes before his face lit with warmth. "Harold, it's been too long. How's retirement treating you?" I set the deed down on his desk, my voice firm and without preamble. I need to sell the house on Oakwood Street, as quickly as possible. I want it gone from their hands before they return." Joyce paused, his seasoned eyes drilling into me as though searching for the backstory. But professionalism won. He swiveled back to his computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. "The market is hot right now. A house like that, in that neighborhood, 180, maybe 190,000. You paid 130, didn't you?" I nodded. The number lifted a weight from my chest. This wasn't just profit, it was retribution. "How long until it sells?" I asked. "If it's priced right, just a few days, priced to move quickly." Joyce pulled out the listing forms, scheduling a home inspection, his motions brisk and precise. He looked up at me cautiously. "We'll need photos, maybe a little staging. I can have someone there tomorrow. But does Elena know about this?" "Number Elena is in Munich. I have the keys." He blinked, then gave a small nod before handing me the papers. I signed, each stroke strong and deliberate, as though I were carving a sentence for betrayal itself. The scratch of the pen across paper sounded like a gunshot, silent but fatal. We shook hands. I silently thanked him for not pressing further. He simply said, "I'll get started immediately. In this market, you'll have a buyer within days." Driving away from his office, I turned on the radio. Classical music filled the car, no longer a soothing melody, but the drumbeat of an advancing army. At a red light, I watched a young family cross the street. The father cradled a child while the mother pushed a stroller. Memories of Elena as a little girl surfaced unbidden. But things were different now. Once, I had given everything. In return, I had been discarded. When I reached home, I sat in the car for a few minutes. My eyes lingered on the weathered mailbox. The name Harold faded but still visible. That name now carried a new meaning, no longer the old father to be used, but a man reclaiming control. Inside, I opened my laptop. An email popped up instantly. "Property listed successfully." The glowing words blazed across the screen like a declaration of war. Yet I knew this was only the first step. I opened another tab, searching for moving services. The results were dominated by large companies, but I scrolled further down. I wanted something more personal, discreet, and dependable. Then I saw it, Basil's Moving Service, a family-owned business with 20 years of experience. The reviews were clear, fast, discreet, never ask unnecessary questions. I dialed the number. "Basil's Moving, this is Basil." His voice was deep, steady, free of any rehearsed script. "I need a full house cleared tomorrow. Urgent situation. Details? 8A, M Oakwood Street. Everything to storage. I want it done before they return." "You've got a storage unit?" Basil asked. I hesitated. "Not yet." "No problem. I know Dylan at Hawthorne Storage. We work together often. I'll patch you through." Minutes later, a woman's voice came on the line. "This is Dylan at Hawthorne Storage. Basil tells me you need a large unit for a full house?" "That's right. You'll need a 10 by 20. First month's rent is $120, prepaid. Shall I lock it in?" "I'll take it." Basil cut back in. "Truck and 2 men. We'll start at 8 sharp and have it done by midday." "Good. I want it fast. I want it quiet. No one outside of us knows." "Family business, huh?" Basil lowered his voice, as if he'd seen situations like this before. I gave a cold laugh. "Family business, but not like any family you've ever seen." I ended the call and paid online. For the first time in days, I felt hungry. I ate dinner, set the alarm for 6:30, and laid out old jeans and heavy work boots, relics from my days as a construction foreman. Not just clothes for labor, but armor for battle. That night, I watched the evening news. Tomorrow's weather promised clear skies, perfect for what lay ahead. I switched off the television and went to the bathroom. The man staring back at me in the mirror was a stranger. The patience, the softness of a father gone, replaced by the hard, cold stare of someone who had buried his leniency to make room for resolve. Tomorrow would not just be a moving day. Tomorrow would be the first battle in my campaign of retribution, and I was ready, down to the last detail. I arrived at the house on Oakwood Street at 8:20 in the morning, 10 minutes earlier than scheduled, a habit etched into me over the years. But this time, the familiar place looked entirely different. It was no longer my daughter's house. It was simply a battlefield that needed to be cleared. Basil's truck was already parked outside, its engine still running, gray smoke curling into the chilly morning air. The sound echoed like the opening drumbeat of a military campaign. Basil climbed down from the cab, a rugged man in his 50s, hardened by experience, carrying the grounded demeanor of someone who had witnessed countless family tragedies yet never passed judgment. Two young men in company uniforms moved briskly, unloading their gear, their steady eyes betraying a quiet familiarity with these kinds of secret relocations. "Mr. Eric," Basil greeted, extending a calloused hand, his voice steady. I clasped it firmly, then unlocked the door with the spare key. A heavy silence rushed out from inside, so thick it felt as though even the walls knew they were about to witness a dispossession. We moved through each room. Basil surveyed the furniture with a professional eye, jotting meticulous notes. "This will take about 3 hours, 4 at most if we count the heavier pieces," he said. I nodded, pointing. "Everything belonging to Elena and Chad. In other words, the entire house. The expensive sofa I had given them last Christmas, Chad's elaborate office setup with his gleaming gaming gear, Elena's enormous wardrobe spilling across 2 dressing rooms. None of it looked like possessions anymore, but exhibits in a trial, evidence of generosity exploited, now being packed up like contraband. The crew started in the bedroom, wrapping and labeling each box with precision. I insisted on helping, despite Basil's concern. "I'm still strong enough to clean up the wreckage," I said. One of the young men chuckled softly, though his eyes flickered with surprise at the chill in my voice. When hauling out the wardrobe, I spotted their wedding album. I flipped a few pages, and the truth struck me hard. Chad's family filled the center of every frame, while I lingered at the edges, a shadow deliberately pushed aside. I shut the album and handed it over to the movers, my voice hoarse but firm. "Take it." Room by room, more luxuries emerged. Designer handbags, shiny electronics, the leather dining set I had given them for their first anniversary. Each piece sealed into a box was like a blade, reminding me of my own naivety. In the room once intended for a child, I saw brand new nursery furniture for grandchildren who never came. A knife of regret sliced through me. But then I found Chad's credit card statements bloated with lavish expenses, all while they had pleaded poverty. In an instant, pity turned to steel. "You all right, Mr. Eric?" Basil asked, noticing I had paused. I answered flatly, "Just the ashes of illusions, Basil. Keep going." By 11:30, we completed the final sweep. The house now stood empty, the midday sunlight pouring across bare wooden floors, resonating like the wail of memories just erased. I locked the door, slipped the key into my pocket, and followed the truck to the storage facility, watching silently as their entire life disappeared behind the steel door of Unit 47B. I handed Basil cash, with a generous tip. "Hope everything works out for you, Mr. Harold," he said sincerely. I only nodded, offering no reply. On the drive home, my phone lit up, Facebook notifications flashing in rapid succession, buzzing in the cup holder. The sound no longer felt meaningless. It tolled like an alarm bell, a warning that the real war had only just begun. In the stillness of the kitchen, the phone kept vibrating relentlessly on the table. At last, I picked it up, the screen flooded with Facebook notifications. Elena had posted a furious status. "Some people have no respect for family privacy." Beneath it, her friends clamored with questions, while Elena played the perfect victim, concealing the venomous truth. I closed the app without a single reply and immediately dialed Joyce. His cheerful voice rang through the line. "Harold, great news. We have a serious buyer. All cash. A young couple just moved here for work, and they absolutely love the neighborhood." He paused deliberately, clearly building suspense before delivering the figure. "They're offering $205,000 higher than expected." The number lifted the weight from my chest. It wasn't just profit. It was a blow struck directly at those who had belittled me. "When do they want to close?" I asked. Here's the remarkable part. They want to close immediately. They could move in this weekend. I checked the calendar. Thursday. This weekend? That's right. They've been stuck in a company-leased apartment and are eager. I gripped the phone tighter. Prepare the paperwork tomorrow. Understood, Joyce replied. Friday morning I sat in the title company office, carefully signing each page. Across from me were Neil and Alan Orson, early 30s, eyes shining with hope. They spoke about the garden, the trees, and in that moment I couldn't help but recall Elena as a child, before everything became about money and manipulation. Perfect, Neil smiled, taking the keys. We can move in tomorrow. Right then my phone buzzed. Transfer confirmed $205,000. After fees, $195,000 in profit. I smiled faintly. What once had been a paternal gesture had now turned into a successful transaction and a lesson. Saturday morning, I drove past the house one last time. Noon, sunlight poured down, exposing everything as though the final curtain had just fallen on a stage. In the driveway, instead of a U-Haul, a white Ryder truck loomed large. Neil and Alan directed movers with energy. A baby crib was carried inside. Alan knelt planting flowers in the front yard, while Neil set up a small swing in the backyard. The scent of fresh soil, the bloom of new flowers, and the sound of neighbor children playing carried the promise of beginnings. For Elena and Chad, what awaited them now was nothing but a bitter end. As I turned off the ignition, a taxi pulled up. The timing could not have been more perfect. Elena stepped out, her face weary from the long flight, then instantly froze at the sight before her. Chad paid the driver, his eyes darting wildly from shock to disbelief to panic. "Excuse me," Chad called out to Alan, who was wiping his hands on garden gloves. "What are you doing in our house?" Neil appeared from inside, holding a folder of papers. "Your house? I think there's been a mistake. This is our house." I stepped out of my car, each stride steady and deliberate. Elena saw me, her expression flipping from confusion to fury in seconds. "Dad, what's happening? Why are strangers in our home?" Neil held up the deed, his voice calm. "We closed yesterday. Here's the proof." Chad flushed red, snarling, "Impossible! This is our house." Alan, quiet but firm, interjected, "Maybe we should call the police." I stepped forward, my voice even, authoritative, as if court had just been called to order. "No need. The house has been sold, because it belongs to me." "Why?" Chad's face drained of color. "What do you mean, belongs to you?" "Check the original deed. It was never in your names." Elena shrieked, her voice sharp as glass. "You can't sell our house!" I gave a thin smile. "I sold my property, and I did exactly that." "This is theft. We'll sue," Chad shouted. I locked eyes with him, cold and steady. "To sue, you need money, the same money you already burned through in Munich with my card." Neil and Alan exchanged glances, then calmly retreated inside their new home. The door closed. A period, final and unyielding. Elena nearly screamed, "Where will we live? Where are our things?" I handed over an envelope. Chad tore it open, reading aloud in a strangled voice. "Hawthorne Storage Unit 44-7B." Elena clutched her head, despair flooding her. "You put our entire life in storage?" "I preserved everything carefully. First month's rent is already paid." Chad crumpled the paper in his fist, roaring, "You can't do this to your own family." I replied icily, "Family doesn't exile their father from a so-called family vacation." "That was different," Elena screeched. "Different?" I fixed my eyes on her. "A father can sacrifice everything for his child. But tell me, what have you ever sacrificed for your father?" Around us, curious neighbors had stopped to watch. Elena and Chad, still dragging suitcases straight from the airport, looked like two vagrants cast out of a home they once dared to call their own. I turned my back and walked toward my car. Each step struck the pavement like the final nails being driven into the coffin of years of exploitation. "This isn't over!" Chad shouted after me. I opened the door, started the engine. Classical music swelled, drowning out their desperate screams. I whispered, just loud enough for myself, "No, it's over." 3 months later, a quiet morning was shattered by a chilling sound. The doorbell rang, sharp and cold, like a judge's gavel striking down. I rose, opened the door, and there stood a court officer. He handed me a thick stack of documents. The papers felt icy in my hands, the title on the cover clear and merciless, "Complaint filed by Elena and Chad." I signed for it without the slightest surprise, for deep down, I had been waiting for this moment. By afternoon, I sat in the kitchen, dim light spilling through the window, reading line by line through the court's ruling. The bolded words stared back at me like the final seal burying every last argument. Case dismissed. The property owner holds full rights to sell the estate. Plaintiffs are responsible for all legal fees. I exhaled slowly. Not a single line expressed sympathy for Elena or Chad. The verdict was blunt, decisive, cutting through their last illusions like a blade. Less than an hour later, the phone rang. My lawyer's voice carried both relief and irony. "Harold, this is an absolute victory. They don't even have solid ground left to stand on for an appeal." I closed my eyes, answering slowly, each word dropping like a verdict of my own. At last, justice knows how to speak, even when family does not. That day, the local newspaper carried only a small notice: "Family property dispute resolved." Short, cold, revealing nothing of the tragedy behind it. But for me, it was enough. I pressed the file shut, labeled it legal victory. It wasn't just paperwork, it was a headstone laid over the grave of deceit and greed. I slid it into the cabinet, closed the drawer, as if closing an entire chapter of my life. Outside, the town still buzzed with gossip. In the cafe, whispers drifted like cigarette smoke. I always thought that son-in-law was nothing but a leech. Eric Harold worked all his life. He deserves better than that. And of course, the judgmental tones. Family should stick together, no matter what. But all of it passed over me like wind over stone. None could pierce the calm armor I had donned since the verdict was handed down. I pictured Elena and Chad's faces when they learned they had lost, stunned, devastated, like gamblers who had gone all in on their final hand and lost everything. The image alone was enough to make me smile. That day, I finished my cup of coffee, and for the first time in years, it tasted only of coffee, not of betrayal's bitterness. Later in the afternoon, I ran into Joyce at the hardware store. He glanced at me with a probing look. "How are things these days?" he asked. I replied, my voice steady, calm, yet resolute, a summation of it all. "I never thought I'd see the day I felt this light, Joyce. But sometimes, losing what you once thought was family is the only way to finally find yourself." That afternoon, I stepped into the pet store I had been eyeing for months. The shopkeeper, a kind-eyed middle-aged man, pointed toward a golden-coated Labrador retriever. "This is Kiki, 4 years old. Her former family had to move overseas. She's used to living with people, very friendly, and especially loves car rides. She needs someone who will never leave her behind." I bent down on one knee. Kiki immediately walked toward me, her deep eyes carrying the sorrow of partings but also glimmers of new hope. Her tail wagged furiously, as though she had recognized in me the same wound she bore. The connection was instant. I stroked her head gently and whispered, "All right, the passenger seat is yours from now on." An hour later, Kiki was in that seat, head poking out of the window, her ears and golden fur dancing in the wind. Together, we set out toward a new beginning. That night, she slept at the foot of my bed. Her steady breathing was like a lullaby, soothing the hollow inside my chest in a way no one from my old family ever had. For the first time in months, neither of us felt alone. While Kiki drifted into sleep, I opened my laptop and browsed articles about travel trailers. One headline caught my eye: "The best RV models for seniors who love adventure." Just a few lines in, my heart stirred. At the dealership, I test drove a 25-foot Airstream small enough to handle, large enough to carry all the unfinished journeys I still owed myself. When I signed the contract with my savings, and the trade-in value of my old car, Kiki leapt onto the passenger seat as if to confirm this was our new home. I began planning. National parks, small towns, roads I had always dreamed of but postponed because of family obligations. This time, there was no one left to hold me back. On the morning we left Springfield, I prepared my house for a long absence. Arranged for the mail to be held, asked neighbors to keep an eye out, and packed the only thing I still kept from Elena, a photo album filled only with her childhood pictures. I left behind every image from later years, carrying only the purest memories when father and daughter had not yet been stained by money and greed. The RV's wheels rolled across the pavement, leaving behind not only a town, but an entire lifetime of bitter ties. Driving past Oakwood Street, I saw Neil and Alan Orson's children playing in the yard, their laughter ringing out like a farewell. That house had finally reclaimed its soul joy instead of quarrels. The highway opened wide, a green sign ahead reading, Utah 500 miles. My grip tightened on the wheel. Kiki leaned out of the window, eyes shining with excitement. At last, we were truly free. That evening, I parked at a scenic overlook on the Utah Plateau. I unfolded a chair, sat down, and watched the sunset blaze over the Red Rock Mountains. The sky erupted in fiery oranges and purples, like a rebirth ritual for a man who had once been broken but now stood again. Kiki lay beside me, calm and loyal, asking for nothing but my companionship. I whispered, not to anyone else, but to myself and the dog by my side. From now on, I will never lose myself again in exchange for a false kind of love. And for the first time in many years, I felt I was exactly where I belonged. If this story touched you, please hit like to show your support, subscribe so you never miss another turn in this journey, and share your thoughts in the comments. I would truly love to hear your story. And if you want to continue along this path full of surprises, click on the box to the left of the screen to hear the next chapter. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.